So happening guys, I'm Ash, welcome to the Rash Child channel. Today I'll be telling you how I control my amp, my pedals, using the Boss ES-5 in 4 cable method. So I've been living in Japan now for about 8 years, and since I've been here, I've been doing a few bands. I've played a good amount of gigs and had a lot of fun experiences. I started off doing a metal band using a Black Star 100 watt amp. I can't remember the model, using just a basic pedal board with wah, delay and an overdrive, no problem. Then the Line 6 Helix came out, and I was very fascinated in going digital because, having the pedal board and amp all in one convenient box seemed very logical to me, so I bought one. So I sold the amp and the pedal boards, and I bought a Line 6 Helix and a Yamaha DXR10 speaker. It was great, it sounded fantastic, and using the features of so many different amp sounds and so many different effects all in one box was really convenient. And the guitarist in my band, he played with an amp and a pedal board, and sometimes it was very difficult to kind of I wouldn't say compete, but the sound from a speaker compared to an amp pushing air through a cabinet, is very different, and it was sometimes a little bit difficult to compete. But still, it sounded great. Amazing sound from those. There's lots of different modelers, like the Axe Effects and the Kemper, and now of course the new Neural DSP one, and they all sound great in their own different ways. Personally, I slowly started enjoying not playing, because for me there's something just amazing about an amp, a cabinet, a few pedals, and just play from there. It just sounds amazing and so much fun. And I agree, if you are a touring musician, then getting an Axe Effects, Kemper, Helix, etc., that is definitely the way to go, because the amount of money that you could save on traveling and plane rides and things like that, it's ridiculously to be honest, it's not even a competition anymore. I mean, would you pay $11,000 to take your cabinet and amp, or just have a Helix or a Kemper, and you don't have to pay any of that amount of money? It's a no-brainer, really. But personally, I play in a band for fun, and I just want to enjoy the experience, play a few gigs now and again, and that's enough for me. This video is mainly going to be focused towards people who play live but want to use the amp and cab. I'm not in any way saying that you shouldn't go digital, because the options are amazing, especially the new Neural DSP, and Kemper is fantastic because it has that Shang Tsung quality where it just steals the soul of any amp that you want to. So when I switched back to my amp and cab, I bought the EVH 5150 EL34 right behind me, and I changed band. The band became more of an alternative rock band with a new singer and new members, and before we had a metal, it was a metal band, and there's 2 guitar players, so it sounds great with 2 guitar players occasionally harmonizing, etc. But with the new band, I thought having 2 guitarists was a little bit overkill. That's why I think Bring Me the Horizon deserve a lot of kind of respect in a way, because they did have the 2 guitar players when they were playing metal, and then when they switched to the more popular sound that they have today, they didn't need the guitar player, so they changed him for a keyboard player. Now I didn't really want to do that. I don't want to change to a keyboard, so I made my pedal board basically into more of an effects unit that would accompany the other guitar and have more of a, kind of like a keyboard player in a way, but just having a lot of atmospherical stuff and just adding more to verses and choruses other than just playing the same part. So in this video, I'm just going to show you how I do, what I do with my setup and how it's done. And before you say it looks complicated, look at some of these.
Oh my god! Ah! 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 Ah!
Those are complicated. So loop switchers, basically, instead of having to press each pedal on, you plug all your pedals into the loop switcher in the inputs and outputs, for example 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in my case, and all you do is you can program it so when I press this button, then two of the pedals turn on, or 3 of the pedals turn on, whatever. You can program it however you want to do. I'll show you more about that in a moment. Now I'm able to change the channel of my amp and change any preset on any of my pedals that are MIDI enabled to whatever sound I want using the ES-5. There is an 8 version, which is a much longer one if you have more pedals, and actually you can do exactly what I'm going to do right now, but in a much simpler way. So remember, with loop switchers, there's so many different brands. There's the Boss ES series, there's the Gig Rig, which I think is from the UK. There's a bunch, there's a few of them. You don't have to go for this one exactly. This is just what I use, because what I like about it is that with the Boss ES-5, if I put my pedals in a certain order, I can rearrange them in any order I want, and it doesn't affect the sound. Some of them you would have to unplug, you know, for example, if number 1 is an overdrive and number 2 is a delay, if you wanted to switch the order, you'd have to physically take them out and put them back in. With the Boss ES-5, you don't have to do that. You can move everything using the built-in matrix. It's fantastic. Now also, everything that I'm talking about today, that I'm about to tell you, I learned from Facebook. No, so Facebook groups, there's a very good group on Facebook. Just search for the Boss ES-5 Facebook group. The community there is fantastic. They helped me with, you know, doing what I wanted to do, because, you know, like I said, I didn't have any idea. All I wanted to do was be able to do the same thing I could do with my Helix that I can do with my amp, which was to be able to control, you know, each effect and turn on whatever I wanted to do. And there's a lot of good people in there who will help you. So if you have any extra questions to do with that, I would rather you just go there and ask them, because they'll sort you out. Now, if you are a complete beginner and you're wondering what MIDI is, all it is just a signal that you send to your pedal to change a preset. So for example, let's say you have a pedal that has 10 presets. Now, if you're playing live and in a verse you want to have, let's say a delay, you want to have a certain delay sound on the verse, and on the chorus you want to have a different one. So instead of having to buy 2 units, you can just use MIDI. So you could have, let's say, preset 1 is, you know, let's say preset 1, and you can program and just say, okay, MIDI 1 for the verse. And then on the second one, you could have the preset 2. And instead of having to physically touch them, you would just switch it on the loop switcher and it automatically changes to the preset you want. And you can do many things like expression pedals. For example, I have my expression pedal, which is plugged into my Boss ES-5, and I can control any MIDI compatible pedal, the parameters, you know, let's say the speed of the delay or the depth of the reverb using that. It's fantastic. You know, it's very, very good. It is very difficult when you first get into it, but if you look into it more, you know, there's lots of videos online about it. It's not that hard. You can do it. So let me show you what I do. So let's quickly run through each pedal. So from top left, we have the Free the Tone Future Factory, which is a delay pedal. This is actually the signature version of Ken from the Japanese band L'Arc-en-Ciel. The only thing different is that it has colorful LEDs. The next one is the Strymon Mobius, which is a modulation pedal. Now, I should have said, sorry, that the Future Factory is MIDI enabled and the Mobius is MIDI enabled. So this has, you know, choruses and phases and things like that. It's fantastic. Next up is the ISP G-string decimator, which is a noise gate, and it actually tracks the signal of the front of my guitar, and also it goes into my effects loop to make sure that my amp is very quiet and also there's no feedback from my guitar. Next up is the Empress Buffer Plus. There's a lot of cables running in through here, so I feel like I needed a buffer to make sure the signal isn't lacking. The ES-5 does have built-in buffer, but I'm just more comfortable using a dedicated one. Next up is my custom Klon Centaur clone from Made by Mike Pedals in the UK. Check out his website, they're fantastic. This is my Jurgen Klopp custom one. Next up is the Boss SY200, which is a MIDI synth pedal, you know, has MIDI enabled. Next up is the Orange 2-stroke, which is kind of a booster pedal, but I mostly use it for the parametric EQ. Empress has a really good one, but it's just they don't make them anymore, and they're stupidly expensive to buy. Next up is the Empress compressor, MK1. It's a great studio quality compressor, it's fantastic. I really like that one. The next is the Source Audio Ventris, which is a reverb pedal, MIDI enabled, sounds fantastic. Next up is my tuner, very simple Korg pitch black tuner. Then we have the Whammy DT, which is essentially has the whammy and also has the drop pedal feature into it. So I can actually not just drop it and up too, I can change octaves up and down. If I want to change my tuning down to drop D or drop C, I can do that, and they can even go up as well, which is amazing, which is also MIDI enabled, which is actually very important. And on the right then we have the expression pedal, which is plugged into the Boss ES-5, and it has no problems there, just controlling parameters. And on the far left we have the Ditto looper, which I mainly use just for just recording the sound of my amp and then feeling around the settings to get the sound. Instead of just having to keep playing the same riff over and over, I can record it with the Ditto. Only if it's at the front of your loop. If it's at the front of your loop, then it does that. Then you can change the settings. It's great. If you want to use it in a traditional looping setting, then you want to put it at the end of your signal. Okay, now let's look at the change, shall we? So let's look at, in input 1, I have got my overdrive, the clone, send, or copy. In the second input, I have my compressor. The third input is free right now. I'll go into that in a little second. The fourth one is the Boss SY200, and the fifth one is the Mobius. Now, why is the third one open? There's a good reason for that. Now, the Boss ES-5 has 5 inputs and outputs, right? But if you're someone who wants to use the 4-cable method, now let me try to explain for you people who've never heard of this before. So, when I have a traditional pedal board, you plug your guitar into the pedal board, it goes into the front of the amp, into the amp input, which is great for things like overdrive and fuzzes and things like that. But if you're using time and modulation effects like reverb and delay, they sound much better when you put them into the effects loop of the amp. Now, a lot of older amps don't have effects loops, so that's why David Gilmour didn't use it, and of course he sounds great, but also he wasn't using a lot of gain. And if you are using a lot of gain, and like for example like a lead with some delay and reverb, if you put it into the front of the amp, it does become quite muddy and quite undefined. Personally, I like to have all my delay and reverbs in the effects loop. It just sounds better, but it's not a rule. You don't have to do this. But if you are interested in doing that, on a traditional pedal board, you need to have 4 cables. This is why it's called the 4-cable method, because my guitar will go into the input. The guitar will go into my pedal board, and then from out of the pedal board into the front of the amp. Then it would go from the amp send into the input of your delay. Let's just imagine you only have one pedal for right now. So from the send in the amp into the input of the delay, the output goes into the return. Number 3 is basically I'm going to use it as my effects loop. Now the wonderful thing about the ES-5 is that you can move each pedal where you want it to be, but I like to have it in the middle just so it's easier to to understand. So let's take a look at this image right here to explain better. So you can see that I have now number 1, my input is the clone, number 2 is the compressor, number 4 is the SY200, and 5 is the Mobius. Now we look at on the right here, the I means the input, and the next we say front, which will be front of the amp. 3. So 3 is what my effects loop is going to be. So I'm always going to have number 3 turned on my ES-5. Now anything between 1 and 3 in this area right here will be in the front of the amp, which is why I would put my centaur and my compressor in the front. So my chain will always be 1, so input 1, 2, 3. Now the SY200, 99% is going to be in the effects loop because I use it just for effects and things like that. But the Mobius has chorus and phase, and with this kind of pedal, sometimes it sounds better in the front and sometimes it sounds better in the back. So I like having it in the loop because then I can move it wherever I want. For example, so we can see the input is 1, which is the centaur. Number 2 is the compressor. Now these are all in the front, and the SY200 and the Mobius are in the effects loop. Now I could change around. Let's say I want to have the Mobius in the front. I could go here, input 1, 2, 5, 3, and then 4, and that's it. So let's run through the change, shall we? So firstly, we have the guitar goes into my buffer, then into the Ditto looper pedal, and then into the whammy, and then goes straight into the input of the ES-5. Next, from the output, we can see the ES-5 output will go into the 2-stroke, into the Future Factory, into the Ventris, and then into the output of the buffer, and that goes into the amp return. Now the reason why these, for example the Ventris and the Future Factory are there, is because they are MIDI enabled, and they will always be in the effects loop. I'm never going to need to move them into the front of the amp, so it's a waste to put them in a loop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can just keep them in the signal and turn them on and off by MIDI. For example, on the verse, I want to have that. I can just control MIDI control on and off. So maybe I want to have a verse with a little bit of reverb and no delay. So instead of having to put them into a loop and taking up a space, I can just control it by MIDI and turn on the delay or turn off the reverb, whatever I want to do. We can see right here, see the send of loop 3. Now remember guys, you can do this for anyone you want. I just use it for number 3, that's what I like to use. The send goes into the input of your amp. Now the return of the preamp, you know, the loop 3, which is what I'm using for the effects loop, goes into my decimator, into the guitar in and out, which then goes into the send of the amp, which is essentially making sure that my amp sounds very quiet. In the tuner out is going into the guitar input of the decimator, which will track my guitar signal, which means that, you know, it's kind of like a smart gate and will know the level that I'm inputting. And it goes into the tuner and it ends right there with the tuner. The tuner doesn't need to be plugged into anything because that's where it is. So that's the chain. Now, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, which is what I thought when I first had it, was that's a lot of messy pedals, which is why I purchased a Rockboard pedal board. Now, these pedal boards have these amazing called mods. Now, if you look at the mod, you can plug it into the back of the pedal board and it acts as like a, you know, like a little hub. So like this, right? So for example, A, B, C, and D. Now, these are just line inputs. So for example, I have my guitar plugged into A, B would be connected to the input of the amp, and then C and D is the send and return. And I can line everything very neatly into the correct input. As for the MIDI, you know, the MIDI cable will go straight to my amp as well, which goes into here. And I also have, if you can see, there's right on the right, there's a kettle input for the power. I also use 2 power supplies because I have a lot of pedals on there. And this little ring here is for one of the regular DC inputs. And there's a USB because actually a lot of the pedals are controllable by USB. And on my pedal board, I have a USB hub, which I just plug directly into, and then I don't have to, you know, reconnect everything. Now, in regards to MIDI, you can daisy chain everything together, but a lot of my pedals only have one MIDI input, which is a problem because then I can't chain a bunch of them together, right? So this is what I do. Now, this box in the middle here is called the Kenton MIDI through. There's a bunch of different ones you can use, just what I use, which is just a MIDI, you know, just a MIDI box basically. So it goes from the output of the MIDI, you know, because remember the Boss ES-5 is sending signals, right? It's not receiving them, it's just sending them. So it goes from the output of the Boss ES-5 into the MIDI in of the through 5. Then all the other things are connected by the other inputs. For example, MIDI through 1 goes to the whammy. MIDI through 2 goes to the SY200. MIDI through 3 goes to my amp to control the channel. MIDI through 4 goes to the Future Factory, and then 5, because you know you can daisy chain a lot of them together if you want to, no problem. The Ventris and the Mobius are daisy chained together, and there's no issues there. So I know you're thinking it's very complicated, and yes, it is. This is why going into modulars is just such a better option for a lot of people, because you don't have to mess around with all these pedals and cables and things like that. It is a lot of hard work, but if you're someone like me who's very passionate about, you know, pedals and things like that, it's pretty fun. I love building these things. But if you're like me, you just want to use your favorite amp, which is this one, and your pedal board to do something, this is a good way to go around it. Alright, so let's just demonstrate something, shall we? Now this is the board. Let's have a quick look at how we're doing. So we can see that the ES-5 here, this is just for one of my band songs that I would use it for. This is the intro. Okay, so this is on number 1, and let's just play something. Okay, so that's the intro, right? Now in the verse, I want to change it so that there's no delay and that there is some chorus. So if I press 2, oh, we can see, right? So look here, we can see the light of the, you know, the gold pedal is going off, right? See, and it changes from to this. From this. See, so that's the intro and the verse, and I can quickly switch between them. So you can see all the lights changing, right? And those are the MIDI pedals, and it's very, very simple how we do it. So, and then check out the pre-chorus, which is using the SY200. See, and it's very instant, right? There's no delay or anything like that. It sounds fantastic. So that would be the pre-chorus, and then if I want to switch to, you know, the rhythm sound of a little bit later in the song, go to number 4, and you know, it'll sound like. Or, you know. There we go. And then the last patch will just be a little breakdown part with the whammy, using the whammy. Can you see the whammy turning on too? So hopefully you can see the benefits, see, because if you do have, you know, a band with like 10, 15 songs, I'm sure they have a lot of different parts, and, you know, having to buy 3 of the same pedal just seems crazy when you can just use MIDI. Now, you know, so for example, my delay pedal has a lot of different effects that I can use, the Mobius has a lot, and even the whammy, which has a lot of different settings, but, you know, instead of having to kneel down in between songs and change everything, you just program it with the ES-5 and everything becomes great. So let's look at my amp too. Yeah, so we can also see the amp changing, see? So if I change from this to that's all one button, you know? You can just change it up. Now, if your amp does have more than 3 channels, it does become a little bit tricky, but it is doable. Like I said, go to the Facebook group and check it out there. We'll see, we can just... like that. So that was just a basic rundown of what I do, how I use it, and what I use it for. I'm only using it in a live band situation to be able to use my amp and my pedals and have no need to tap dance or anything like that. Everything is programmed to one song. You know, I have one song, I keep it to 5 patches. It's enough, you don't need any more than that. You know, in the future I might do some more videos explaining, you know, dive deeping into the ES-5. So if you do have any questions, either leave a comment and I'll try my best to reply, or go to the Facebook group ES-5, ES-8 and ask questions there. They'll help you, very, very helpful people. But you can see why people are going more into modulars, right? Because that's a lot of money there. It's not cheap to do that. To have your amp and your pedals and all those things to do that. If you just invest the money into something like a Neural DSP, Quad Cortex or a Kemper, you can do all those things with, you know, in a much easier way. But, you know, for me personally, I just like using an amp and a pedals. I like that. And that's actually, the Quad Cortex is kind of scary because I think you can actually sample sounds of pedals and things like that, which is amazing, which hopefully I can get into that one day, get one of those. And yeah, I'm not recommending either way, because if you do like using, you know, a Line 6 Stomp or Kemper, they sound fantastic. There's nothing wrong with them. But if you do want to keep your amp and you do want to have all the options that are available to people with modulars, then the best way to do it is with the loop switcher, such as the ES-5 or the ES-8. So in upcoming videos, I'm going to be trying to go into more deep dives into my pedals and MIDI and all those kinds of things and how you can use them. So if you do have any questions or any videos you'd like to see, please leave a comment and I'll try to get back to them. Alright guys, hopefully that helped. Take care and I'll catch you next time. Bye.